Now, last night, I have to tell you, I was deeply touched and blown away. Some of you might remember during the second term of George W. Bush, he had a White House ceremony for Pope Benedict. And at that ceremony, the United States Army Chorus and Band did a rousing rendition of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And it just, it blew me away. I was deeply touched by it. I found a way to get a copy of it, and I started listening to it over and over and over again, recognizing every element of the performance. And I was so moved by it, I actually called the White House and begged somebody to just put President Bush on the phone for just 30 seconds so that I could thank him for what had happened. Because it was a White House ceremony where, once again, God had, with no fear and without any unabashed nervousness, had been reintroduced to the White House and to the country. God was on full display. The Battle Hymn of the Republic with Pope Benedict, and I felt compelled to thank President Bush. And I'd sent Karl Rove an email quickly while this is all going on, and I said, could you do what you could to help? He said, I don't think it's going to happen. We're on a tight schedule today. Well, it happened. President Bush came on with 30 seconds that ended up to be a couple of minutes, and I thanked him profusely for that ceremony. It remains one of the most incredible things that I have seen, and it's largely focused around the performance by the Army Chorus of Battle Hymn of the Republic. So last night, yeah, we've got that. Well, before the program ends, I'll play that performance that happened. Do you have the date on that by any chance? Does the computer entry have the date that happened? Not that it matters. It'd just be an interesting point. But it was in Bush's second. Anyway, last night, I'm watching the inaugural events that are taking place at the Lincoln Memorial. And Toby Keith is performing, a couple of other groups are performing, and the Trump family is there. And a huge crowd. Trump addressed the crowd at one point and made mention of the fact that it was unprecedented, that such an event had not really happened on Inauguration Eve and had been so well attended. And then I heard the public address announcer announce the United States Army Band and the chorus doing Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I said, whoa! I said, it's, I don't know what it was, but it had deep meaning. And here came the performance. And it was practically identical to the performance at the White House for Pope Benedict. It had the same orchestration, the same arrangement. I know members of the Army Band and chorus change constantly, but it sounded the same. And the fireworks were going off. The Trump family had ascended the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and they were standing at the top while this song was being sung and performed. And the fireworks display was just never ending. It was one of the most over-the-top fireworks displays I've seen. It went on. I'm sure there have been others like it, 4th of July in Washington, but it just went on and on and on, and it was intense, and it was loud, and it was never-ending, accompanying the Battle Hymn of the Republic. The history of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, it dates back to the Civil War, and when the song was first played for President Lincoln, he loved it so much that he demanded that whoever was performing it at the time, was written by a woman, demanded that it be played again. And I always had a certain spot in my heart for that song. I have listened to that song be played while watching video of American military aircraft scrambling and taking off from Hawaii and from Air Force bases in California. And I was thinking, what are the odds that the same song, the same performance, would be played here at a Trump inaugural party or ceremony the night before the inauguration? I I don't know. It was deep, deep meaning to me. And then the realization that we were looking at and listening to an event where God was again front and center, with no excuses made and with no apologies and with no attempts to say anything to the people who might be offended. It was just there. It was front and center. And the same thing today. God was present, acknowledged from beginning to end of the Trump inauguration today. And it's something we haven't seen in a while. And I think there is a much more substantive and deep meaning to what's happening here. And it hit me last night when I was watching the inaugural celebration at the Lincoln Memorial, Battle Hymn of the Republic, and some of the speeches and words that were said last night. There's a reclamation of the country taking place, is, I guess, the best way to describe how this is affecting me. And by reclamation of the country, I mean that the people who honor the time-honored institutions and traditions of this country from its founding are reclaiming this country from efforts made by others to eliminate those institutions and traditions or to water them down and to transform this country away from what it was intended to be from its founding forward. I think that's what these last 8 years have been. I noticed that Dr. Krauthammer has a column at National Review. It might be his Washington Post column that runs today. And Dr. Krauthammer, Charles Krauthammer, in his piece today, acknowledges that now Obama has clearly illustrated that he is a radical. And Krauthammer cites the pardon or the commutation of the sentence of Ashley Manning and a couple of other events that says Obama claimed to have a bucket list, but actually it was not a bucket list. It was another kind of list, a word that sounds like bucket, but without a B in it. And I was reading Dr. Krauthammer's piece, and I said, well, I'm glad that he is acknowledging today that Obama was indeed a radical, but it's not new. The fact that Obama has been a radical and a leftist has been something that's obvious since before Obama was inaugurated to me, and I'm sure many of you. And so you couple the events of last night and some of the ceremonial aspects of the inauguration today that surrounded Trump's actual inaugural address, and there's no question there's a reclamation going on. And I think this is one of the things the left knows. And it has them totally disoriented and discombobulated, and they're wandering aimlessly now in the political desert. They haven't the slightest idea what to do, because this is the antithesis of where they thought they were. They thought that after 8 years of Obama, which would lead into 4 or more 8 years, say Hillary, that they were going to finally close the deal and complete the transformation of this country and take it away from the power structure that created and founded this country and turn it over to the people they think have been the victims of the founding of this country. And that's something you and I will deign to speak for you, have a hard time relating to think that the founding of this country has led to victims of it. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, I will omit slavery. Nobody wants to defend that. But even our founders knew it could not be sustained and left steps and procedures in the Constitution for eliminating it, which we did. Slavery is a thing of the past. The American left wants to behave as though it's something still omnipresent and dominant, and it isn't. Aside from that, the idea that this country was founded by the government picking winners and picking losers, and therefore there have been victims of this country from the days of the founding. This has been the guiding principle, the inspiring, motivating principle of the Obama administration, the American left, for the last 8 years, and even prior to that, before Obama was elected. And what's happening with the Donald Trump campaign, the Donald Trump election, the Trump inaugural is what I think is a reclamation project, without ever saying it. Trump's language has this reclamation project described as Make America Great Again. And we're going to bring back American jobs. We're going to protect our border. We're going to protect American manufacturing, bring American business home. We're not going to waste our money overseas on foreign entanglements where our interests are not threatened or involved in this. But you add it all up, and it is a shot. It is a shot across the bow to establishment Washington, who for the longest time has believed this country has a debt to pay to the world, many debts to pay because of our egregious behavior as a superpower. And Trump today put up his hand and said, whoa, and stop. It is not the case. We don't have anything to apologize for, except to the American people who've been left behind by this vast establishment move to globalism led by incompetent politicians who can't be trusted. And they were all sitting there as he said this. They were all standing right behind him as he blamed them for the malaise that exists in the country today. We didn't get too many camera shots of those people standing behind him, but when we did, you could see blank faces, an occasional grimace, an occasional shaking of the head. When we got camera shots of the Congress sitting in the seats closest to the stage area, there was no movement. There was perfunctory applause, but I mean, this was incredible. The fearless repetition of the high points of the Trump campaign were front and center in the Trump inaugural address. And it was breathtaking. I had no expectation for the speech. I didn't have any idea what it was going to be. I know that many pundits in the establishment, many drive-by analysts expected, because they still don't know what they're dealing with, they expected that Trump would become one of them today. They expected that the campaign and the transition have all been Trump acknowledging the people who elected him. But starting today, Trump was going to be, quote-unquote, presidential. And that means Trump was going to become of Washington. And he was going to deliver an inaugural address that they could lump in with JFK's and one of Reagan's and maybe a couple of three others. And you can't do that. The closest we can get to the inaugural address today is Ronaldus Magnus back in 1980. Now, I mentioned earlier that if you think what Trump said today hasn't been said before in terms of a freshly sworn-in president taking out after the political establishment, honing in on the deficiencies and the problems of the country. If you think, wow, that I've never heard that before, well, then I would direct you to Ronald Reagan's first inaugural. I have a rather lengthy excerpt here, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. But let me just share with you a couple of things that Reagan said in 1981. He said, the business of our nation goes forward. These United States are confronted with an economic affliction of great proportions. We suffer from the longest and one of the worst sustained inflations in our national history. It distorts our economic decisions. It penalizes thrift. It crushes the struggling young and fixed-income elderly alike. It threatens to shatter the lives of millions of our people. Reagan was continuing with his campaign theme, running against the melees of the Jimmy Carter economy and the Jimmy Carter presidency. And his inaugural address continued the theme. Idle industries have cast workers into unemployment, human misery, and personal indignity. Those who do work are denied a fair return for their labor by a tax system which penalizes achievement and keeps us from maintaining full productivity. But great as our tax burden is, it has not kept pace with public spending. For decades, we have piled deficit upon deficit, mortgaging our future and our children's future for the temporary convenience of the present. To continue this long trend is to guarantee tremendous social, cultural, political, and economic upheavals. And then there's this. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. From time to time, we have been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else? All of us together, in and out of government, must bear the burden. The solutions we seek must be equitable and with no one group singled out to pay a higher price. Well, that was Reagan in 1981 in his first inaugural. And you can't get more pointed in criticizing the establishment than to say that government's not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. So what Trump did today is not unprecedented, but he did it, of course, in his unique manner and made no doubt, left no doubt that in his mind and in his administration, this is America first, America second, and America third. And that is going to be the governing philosophy going forward. And he was fearless and unabashed. And I'm still sitting here somewhat taken aback that he said all of this while everybody in his mind who is responsible for the problems was sitting right behind him. Now, I have a soundbite I want you to play. This one struck me, and I think it illustrates well, it's great. It does illustrate the profound difference between ourselves and the American left and the Democrat Party. By the way, Obama is now on the helicopter that when the president's on it, it's Marine One. He's no longer the president, so it's under another designation. Obama and Michelle and the family are now on the way to Joint Base Andrews, where they will be flown on one of the two Boeing 747-400s that is Air Force One when the president is aboard. It will not be Air Force One. Air Force One's a designation. If the president's flying in a Piper Cub, it's called Air Force One. So he's going to be in the same plane that's used to ferry presidents around, but it will be known by its tail number. He's going to Palm Springs before he returns to Washington. He and Michelle are heading to Palm Springs, and I am told she's not crazy about it. So I don't know how long they're going to be there. Obama clearly loves Palm Springs. There are a bunch of very wealthy Democrat donors and people that play golf, and there's a lot of country clubs out there. So it's made to order for somebody who's just left the rigors of 8 years in the Oval Office and needs some downtime. But I'm told from a couple people that Michelle Obama doesn't particularly like it much there, so I don't know how long they will be there.